Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining Painting with Picasso's Grapevine. My name is Leanna Hahn, and I will be your host and teacher for today. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about reflections in water. So in front of us, we have a beautiful, beautiful landscape here. Nice, bright, brilliant colors. We've got a nice deep blue lake here, and what we're going to show you is how to capture the reflection of what's on the side of the lake in the water. So lots of blending techniques, things of that nature. Pretty easy. Once we get going, you'll really enjoy it. As always, we're going to start off with an inventory check of our supplies. So today I get my 3 paint brushes. I'm going to be using my very, very large number 12. I've got a medium size, and I've kind of got a little bit of a, this is kind of a medium, gosh, I don't even know what they call this, but it's just kind of nice for dabbing. So if you don't have this one, you can definitely use that medium one on the side, so don't worry about it. As always, we have our cup of water because we are dealing with acrylics. We have our dab rag because our paintbrushes love water and they like to drip. So once we get them into the water, you're going to notice that when you pull them out, they're very drippy, full of water. You're going to want to make sure that you dip them off before you move onto your canvas, because water will rip off that beautiful work that you've done on your canvas. So for today, I'm going to use an array of colors. So we'll go ahead and lay them out here. We've got some green, kind of a light green. I've got my phthalo blue. And the nice thing about acrylic paints is that they do dry fast, but that's a double-edged sword. So for our technique today and a lot of blending, we're going to have to make sure that we move very, very quickly in using a wet-on-wet blending. We have our cad yellow. We have our naphthol red. We have our standard white, and a little bit of green, and as well, and last but not least, cobalt blue. So to get going, what we're going to do is we're going to start with our very, very large brush. So let's go ahead and take that out of the water, dab it off, and what we're going to do is we're going to decide where is the middle of that painting. So we're going to pick our horizon and choose to put our line directly across the canvas here. So if you recall in the original, it was pretty much about halfway. So to do that, we're going to grab just a little bit of the blue, and we're just going to make a line, just a visual marker here. So just where you know where the top of your painting is and where the water is going to be. Then we're going to go ahead and start moving in with a lot of back and forth with our phthalo blue. What we're doing is we're getting that canvas wet. We're applying that deep hue as a base and just kind of getting that moving across the canvas. Don't worry too much about getting all the dimpling or everything covered. We're going to do a lot of blending that will help with that. I'm just getting that first base out really nice. If you're finding that it's not blending as much, a nice tip is to grab some water, kind of liquefy that. Be very careful with your water, as always. Don't want the dripping. Well, let's go ahead and get some on here. Now, I'm not going to worry too much, again, as I mentioned about covering everything. I'm going to go ahead and jump in to my cobalt blue and start mixing it up a little bit. Just start adding a bit. Immediately, I'm going to grab some of that white, and I'm going to do some blending right on the canvas. You'll notice now we're getting a nice medium tone, and we're getting nice coverage. Anytime you add white to any color, you're going to get a nice coverage. So you'll notice that colors just by themselves sometimes are very luminescent, and it takes a lot to cover. So to really get good coverage, always add white. And it's so counterintuitive because you think, well, gosh, I should be using a lot of the dark color to cover, but that's really not the case. White fixes everything. Now you'll notice here I'm not being too picky and not very selective on where I'm putting the combination. I'm just getting it out there. Grabbing a little bit of that cobalt blue, because really water is so fluid. There's nothing that you can really do wrong to mess up a scene on water. There's some things that you can do to make it look better, but it's a really, really easy approach. All right. So we've got a lot of our streaks out on here. Now, biggest thing, remember to do is take a step back. Now, when you're taking a look at your canvas here, the key thing which you want to be looking for is, are your strokes going evenly left to right? You don't want them slanted, you don't want them arced. Some people have a tendency to use the paintbrush in the way that their arm is moving. You have to get in above that and make sure that your strokes are going very evenly left to right, because that is the way water moves. All right, so we've done a nice job here. We've got our strokes. Now you'll notice too, I'm taking my paintbrush on and off the canvas from one side to the next. I'm not stopping in the middle, at least for now. So now that I've got a nice background, what I want to do is I want to come in and kind of add some depth and highlight. So I'm going to do that using that same brush. I'm going to grab a little bit of the dark. Now here's where you can start in the middle. And I'm going to use the side of my brush using a very soft stroke. I'm not putting a lot of pressure. I'm just letting it glide right across the canvas. And I'm going to leave some of this dimpling here. This is a really nice technique. I'm going to come in right away with some white. I'm going to add in some highlights. Again, feel free at this point to place them in different spots on the water, on your canvas. We don't want them to be consistent. Again, you'll hear me say time and time again, there are no straight lines in nature. So allow your eye to get away from any type of pattern that you might have a tendency to make. So go in, moving back and forth between the dark paint and the white paint. And then take a step back and take a look at it and say, okay, how does that feel? Do I have any wavering? Do I need to go back in and straighten up some lines? Feel free to do so. Now I'm using the tip of my brush this time. I'm adding a little bit of streaking just with the tip of my brush, just to add some texture variation. I've got the nice broad strokes coming here, and now I've got some nice thin strokes. So go ahead, pick a spot. Make sure it's straight. If you need to get in front of it, do so. It is easy, especially when I'm painting on from the side here, it's very easy to lose your perspective on where your strokes are going. So get in front of it if you need to. And so here's the question, when is enough is enough? That's something that you're going to have to get comfortable with. Everybody needs to take a look at it and go, I like it, I feel good with it. I'm able to stop now. So when you get good with that, let's go ahead and wash off our brush, because now we're going to move into the sky. You don't have to get too much off because we're still going to be using a very, very light blue. Now you've already kind of mixed in a little bit of that blue into your white just because we're using that jumping back and forth. So let's go ahead, start with that. I'm going to add just a dab of this cobalt blue. I'm going to go ahead and move this across the top here. Now, I'm going to grab just a dab, and I mean just a dab of this green, because there's a little bit of the reflection of all this nice foliage. It's kind of reflecting both into the sky and onto the water. So I've added just a dab of green, just to kind of bring it in. It's a hue. You really can't see it very distinctly. It's one of those things where you go, is there green in there? I really can't tell. But you just kind of place it. Again, I'm keeping my strokes going left and right. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten up this just a tad. There we go. We don't want our canvas moving all around. Go ahead and continue to move down. And if you get a little of that blue streak in there, that's nice. That's just the sky. That's kind of the illumination of wind moving back and forth across the sky. So, and if you enjoy having a little bit of that green in there, go ahead, add it in. But just keep going over it until you get happy with the lightness. You don't want it very distinct. You just kind of want a hint of it, just a little bit. So as far as where do I stop, again, if you recall from the original, we have bushes kind of coming up here. So I'm not going to take this all the way down. I'm taking it just to a point where I think that the bushes are going to cover the top of my skyline. And then you stop. So now, if you were at home doing this painting, what you would do is you would just take a break and let this dry. And acrylics, again, they dry very fast, which is nice. So you can pick up your painting in about another 7 to 10 minutes. Now, for us to continue going today, I have brought another painting that I already got to that point. So we can continue moving on. You'll notice some of the hues here are going to be a little bit off because, of course, as we're jumping back and forth between the blues and the whites and the greens, everybody's going to have a different variation, a different texture, and a different depth of color. So now what we're going to do is we're going to work on those bushes. And if you recall, the bushes, and I'll kind of bring them up again just so you can kind of see, the bushes here have height variation. So keep in mind, people tend to have a tendency to want to do straight lines. You don't want straight lines. You want to create height. So with that, what we can do is we can start off with that nice middle brush, and we're going to grab just a little bit of this light green. And again, like we did with the horizon line, I'm going to come in and I'm just going to put a place marker, really. And I'm using just a very light dabbing motion just to say, okay, that's where the top of my bushes are going to go. So just give yourself a little marker, a little outline. Then what we're going to do is we're going to come in with some of the dark green, and I'm going to work on maybe 1 or 2 bushes because I don't know if we'll have enough time to get through all the bushes, but the effect is the same thing across. So we'll kind of focus on these. So what I'm doing is I'm setting in here just the base tone, trying to get in the underlying tones. It's a lot easier to brighten it up once you have something darker to work with. Generally, I'll start with the mid-tones, and then I'll bring in a highlight, and then I'll also add in the darkest tone. So you've got those 2 complementing pieces that really give that variation and that 3-dimensional effect. And truthfully, you can't decide where to place them until you're kind of doing it at the last minute. So we got our mid-tones on here, and maybe we'll even go out just a little bit further. Just kind of get some stuff on the canvas. And you can see it is so radical, it's so inconsistent, there's no rhyme or reason. We're just getting coverage here. Just kind of getting it out there. All right, so now whatever we've done in the background, we're going to be doing on the foreground, but we want to make sure we decide what's it going to look like before we start copying this image into the water here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some of this red. This is the 8-ball red. And again, this is just a very light dabbing. Make sure that your edges here, again, are inconsistent. Don't go up with a straight line. Even though we've done a nice job making this horizon very inconsistent, don't take away that inconsistency by making it a peak. You don't want that as well. You want little pieces to come up. All right, then what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and we'll grab some yellow. And this is what we're coming in with our highlights. So you're going to notice that the yellow is going to kind of mix in very nicely. Now I am choosing to place it on the left side of the canvas here, and you'll hear me say this many times. I call this the flashlight effect. So if I had a flashlight and I was shining it on my canvas, where would the light fall and where would the darkness fall? So I keep consistent with that and kind of keep that line in mind as I'm choosing where to place the light. So I'm keeping it to the left, a little bit higher. So now what we've got is we've kind of got a little bit of the red and we've got a little bit of the yellow. I'll go ahead and I'll add a little bit over here. And I'm being fairly heavy with my brush. I'm not being conservative with how much I'm actually placing. So, because I want some of that depth and I want some of that highlight. Now, at the same time, and actually let's finish up that little highlight here and then we'll carry it down. At the same time, once we have placed this here, we're going to go down to the portion right below. And we're going to make a little bit of an image. And that image is really just an luminescent smear, if you will. Really no fancy way to say it. It's the reflective image in the water. But remember, the water is a very fluid, and it doesn't have to be exact. So we're just kind of getting it somewhere near. Doesn't have to be super exact. We're just getting some reflection down here. Now, because there's yellow, you can come in with yellow. If you've got yellow at the top. And a little bit of yellow here. Now, so you've kind of started to see where that reflective image is coming into the water. Again, I'm painting from the side, so make sure you step back, take a look, make sure that your lines are going consistently left to right, and more so that they are even. So you'll have no problem with this because, of course, you're looking straight on. I am just looking from the side here. So let's go in and add a little bit more height and depth. So to do so, I'm going to grab just a little bit of white, and I'm going to start breaking up some of those reflections because I don't want to lose the fact that it is actually in the water. I've done that with the side of my brush, and then this time I'm going to go in with the tip of my brush and kind of create some nice loose lines. All right, so you kind of get the idea. So the last thing that I would point out to you is at the point where your bushes kind of meet the water, you want to come in with some depth here to kind of create that barrier. So I'm using right now a combination of the blue and the black, excuse me, the blue and the green. You can add black if you like. And I'm kind of creating those undertones where we're right at the side, at the end here, right where the two kind of meet. So that's where we want the depth. So just making it evident that there is a distinguishment. And then this, again, this is the part where you come in and you play. If you feel it needs more depth, add more depth. If you feel it needs a little bit more light, add a little bit more light. Maybe a little bit of wisps of the white on the top here. Kind of put your little personal stamp on it. Again, go home, play with your brushes, play with the techniques. You'll notice I used a lot of the tip. I also used a lot of the side, but a very, very light pressure putting it on the side, allowing it to just kind of flow off. So I hope you've learned something today and you've enjoyed our painting session together. If you'd like information on how to get these paintings done, give us a call at Picasso's Grapevine or send an email to info@Picasso'sGrapevine. Thank you.